wants to drag race it, like drag and drive it, auto cross it, street drive it, the works. The very first thing I do on every single car that I tune, regardless of what it is pull the file that is out of it and take a look, see what's going on, especially on something like this that comes in running. So you always have something to fall back on in case something weird happens. But it also helps you kind of see how everything's wired up, inputs, outputs, and ultimately firmware versions, it just ultimately ends up saving a bunch of time. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to build a map on the bench because I'm fairly certain that this is just a wizard. Yeah, this is just a wizard file, so I don't really care about any of the actual map itself, but let's go build a map for it. So if you want my 8-step roadmap of kind of the steps that I take when I tune a car, I'll click the link in the description. And even though I just said I don't care about any of the kind of info in the tune, you see here this learn table just kind of verifies that this thing's way out in left field. So again, we're going to start from scratch, but at least we know what we're up against. And just so you can see why professional tuners usually don't use the learn table, transferring the learn over on this, you can see like you almost have to throw the whole car away after that. And by the time you do that and then you go in and manually fix everything, it's just easier to not use it. At least for the initial tuning, and you know, my experience, once you get everything really close and you're using the learn table just for like little touch-up stuff, it's not so bad, but there's no way I would even begin to start tuning like this. Just built an entire file from scratch, and as I went to save it, the program crashed. So I'm gonna have to do it all over again, it looks like. Should probably follow my own advice and save the file multiple times instead of waiting until the end. So that was a fun Windows update problem, but I rebuilt everything again. So now, again, looking at the file that was in this, I can tell that the throttle body is gonna need some adjustment for the idle. So the thing's totally cold, it hasn't started yet today. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise the idle mechanically on the throttle body, which this one's nice and easy to get to. Then we'll start it up and get going and see if this map I totally guessed on is anywhere close.
I don't know what's gonna happen, you know what I'm saying? I'm just happy to be here.
Feels like the perfect amount. Let's try that. All right, loading the file in. I changed everything, so we're gonna have to cycle the key. I'm gonna do a TPS auto set since I changed the idle. That worked out pretty well. Let's see if it'll start. You gotta push the clutch in? That'd be crazy. Starts good, but I went too high on the throttle. Let me back that down a touch. It's a decent sized throttle body, so a little bit goes a long way. TPS auto set again. It's probably still going to be too high. God damn it. That's actually pretty close. We can at least see where that is once it warms up. Idle's hunting around a little bit. Alright, fixed that already. And responsive. It's probably gonna be a lot of fun to drive. Alright, comes down to idle nice. Let's see. So a little bit interesting, it was just sitting here running, and I was over there and it just shut itself off and it started right back up and everything's been fine. So I have no idea what that was all about, so I have to keep an eye on that. So let's see if our startup is in the ballpark and it doesn't want to rev to 60,000 RPM. I didn't even know they made clutch switches in 1980, whatever year this thing is. Flared up a little higher than I want. I want to bump the idle on the throttle body down a touch. Gonna try a little more IC parked first. To the throttle body. I swear, like, getting the idle right, it usually takes like the longest of the whole damn process. So the kind of pain in the butt part with manual transmission cars is sometimes you'll get them to do everything you want when you're sitting stationary, and then once you start driving you kind of have to retweak everything a bit. So sometimes I'm hesitant to get it all the way exactly the way that I want when I'm sitting here, but usually it's a pretty safe bet to get the startup the way that you want. Back up with it. It liked it better with a little bit more airflow. I always get a kick out of the guys that say they can tune 40 cars a day and it takes them 8 minutes to do a car start to finish, because I don't know, I feel like if you actually care, just the idle should take a pretty decent chunk of time. Sometimes you get lucky and they're a little more cooperative than this is, but I don't know, maybe I'm just terrible at this and they're way better than me or something.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
So with this throttle body, each like 640,000th of a turn is like 400 RPM. So I feel like you have to turn it like the equivalent of a thickness of a piece of paper. So let's see, it's starting to get closer. Maybe I'm picky, I spend too much time on this stuff, but I can't stand cars that don't idle well. Move forward with that, especially knowing that it's possible we might have to change things for the rolling idle. So I am going to, the fueling on this thing's kind of inconsistent too. You start it up one time and it wants one amount, and then you start it up again and it wants a completely different amount. Let's actually, I'm gonna give it a little bit more after start enrichment here. Try this real quick. I'm gonna wear the damn starter out on this car. That was better, but we're going to increase the decay rate a little bit. Go up like 3 seconds, 3.5. This probably sounds weird to say, but this thing smells exactly like you would expect an 88 RX7 with a V8 in it to smell. Alright, that actually made the fueling a lot better. Make sure it comes back to idle nice. That's right on the money. Tip end's a little sloppy, so maybe we'll do that before we start get the dyno rolling. enrichment tables. I'm actually doing this in the main fuel table for now. I just suspect it's probably a little bit low because it wants such a small amount of fuel at idle. Way better. All right, now I'm going to go into the acceleration enrichment. If I'm being completely honest, I haven't even really looked at the air fuel during all this. I just go off of sound and feel until it runs like a normal car, and then I'll like fine tune it based off of the actual numbers. So I've actually gone a little too far, I think. Bring it back down. Sits, I would say kind of what's going on in idle and then what it wants to rev clean. Once we get above like I don't know, let's call it 2000 RPM, it's probably going to be pretty rich. So before I just blindly go changing it, I'm just going to verify that. Let's start rolling it on the dyno. Probably hold it about 2500 RPM or so to get started. The brakes are kind of crunchy sounding. Right off idle, it wants a bunch of fuel, so it's literally just at idle where it doesn't want much, which is pretty common. So I brought it down to about 1500 RPM, which is kind of right past idle. We got one more brake point in between the two. Let's go back down one. I've rolled it enough to have a somewhat of a decent idea. I'm going to shape the fuel curve and then we'll try it again. So you can see how jacked up and ridiculous this looks. So right around here is kind of where we're idling, and then you can see here is where I was playing with the kind of the snappiness off of throttle, and then here is just picking a load point and just getting some ballpark figures in it. So now we know that over here we're gonna have to shape it similar to this, and then you can see here there's this big dent. Just like I said, I knew it was jacked up going into it, so we're gonna have to make this match kind of and blend into this. I have a feeling this will probably be relatively close up here. This is the easy part, and then this will be, I think once we bring this up a little bit, it'll be okay. But sometimes what will happen too is they'll want a whole bunch of fuel here, and then they'll kind of want to taper off down here. So they're all a little bit different. So now I'm going to hold it at a given RPM and just sweep the fuel table and go up and load, and then each brake point, then we'll go to raise the RPM and go to the next one. Body is so sensitive, it's hard to hold your foot still. one spot, just pay attention to what you did, because you'll probably have to do the same thing moving forward. So I got that column pretty good, but I'm sure the fuel table just looks like total trash. So I'm gonna take what I did in that column and then smooth it and blend it and make it all nice and pretty, so it's not all jacked up, and then keep going. So now that I've cleaned that all up, if you can watch the closed loop, we're holding it at 2,000 RPM. So watch the throttle, the closed loop, and it'll go up in the map. Sometimes you have to like give it a second to stabilize. It's pretty good. So I might add a touch of fuel in here. I might not though. See, all the way up to 100% throttle, fueling's right on the money. So having a dyno with steady state control is amazing. This thing runs pretty hot. So now I'm going to keep doing the same thing for all my breakpoints at 2250, 2500, 2750, 3000. This thing runs pretty hot, and steady state's pretty demanding on the cooling system. So I'll probably just do up to about 3000, then we'll start doing some sweep runs. I'm going to need to change my shirt.
It's boring as shit.
I'm like absolutely dripping in sweat. This is wild. So this thing just runs way too hot to keep doing steady state. So I'll probably touch a lot of this up on the road. So I'm gonna do some sweep runs now, pull some timing out. And step one is shaping the fuel curve. Run that was actually really close, so I stayed in it for quite a while. I already made 400 horsepower, so that's a good sign. Alright, let me save this. I think I need to get out of the car for a minute before I pass out. Alright, well, let it cool off. I'm going to take care of something I've been trying to do for a month and haven't had time. Here's the graph after the first run. That side of it's everything's great. The fuel curve is shaping up to be pretty ugly, which happens sometimes, but usually 9 times out of 10 it's like an indication of something else going on. And this thing is like super inconsistent, like I kind of mentioned before. We'll make a run, or I've only made one run, but you know, you start it up and then you shut it off and you start it again, and it's like everything's kind of you know, different. And there's just been some weird stuff going on, so I don't know exactly what that is yet, but we'll try and keep digging in and hopefully figure it out. But I had to make like 2 or 3% correction fueling wise on this. So on this run I got a bunch of timing pulled out of it, so I'm gonna try some timing first, then we might play with some target air fuel stuff. But the I mean, it's hot in here, but the air temps on this thing are like a turbo car with no intercooler. So I just let it cool off for a little while. Hopefully it's just kind of heat soaked in the whole nine. So I'll keep an eye on that as well. So let's try a little bit of timing. Looks like it picked up, but wow, it picked up a lot. 434. Now I'd feel comfortable saying a chunk of that is just from letting it cool off for a couple minutes. Fueling is good at 7,000 Gonna take a couple of percent out. Fuel pressure's good, oil pressure's good. That's like a 12.5 air fuel. Okay, yeah, air temperature is a little more normal now, which is 115 degrees, but it's over 100 degrees outside right now, and obviously it's hotter under the hood. Coolant temp looks good, plenty of duty cycle. So there's one little blip at, what is it, 2800 that shows it wants like 3%, but on both other sides of that it's pulling a little bit. So if you kind of average that out, it's pretty spot on. I'm not going to worry about that, especially that's like right when the dyno is releasing, which will sometimes make it do some weird stuff. But let's look at the two runs laid over top of each other. So that's 30 horsepower. And it picked up power everywhere. So like I said, I think that's a combination of both timing and air temperature. Yeah, that's like too hot to even hold your hand on. It's just crazy for a naturally aspirated car. All right, I'm still soft on timing, so I'm gonna try a little bit more and we'll see what that does. So that one picked up just a few horsepower up top, so I'm probably going to pull that timing back out of it. And I think we'll play with, I'll lean it out a little bit first, and depending on what that does, we might go the other direction, and then maybe try some injector end angle. Then that's about it as far as what we need to do full throttle. And then since this one's being a little bit weird and goofy, I'll probably spend a little bit more time on this one on the street. And then I'm also going to do some like 1/2 and 3/4 throttle dyno pulls just to get this one straight, because this car's going to get like a lot of different uses. It wants to drag race it, like drag and drive it, auto cross it, street drive it, the works. So I just want to make sure that we get kind of the mid-range stuff dialed in as well, or not mid-range, but mid-throttle range, I guess you could say. And then hopefully driving it around on the street will clean up some of the weird stuff. But so far, if you let off the throttle at 7,000 RPM or whatever, it comes back to idle perfectly. It's not hunting or doing anything weird. So hopefully that'll continue out on the road as well. This one will probably go on the dyno next. It's been here before, but now it has new fuel cell, fuel pumps, injectors. So they like upgraded all the fuel system stuff, but actually wants to make less power now. So kind of a weird transition there. And this pile of crap. I've had Holley in this car for probably every bit of a year. I've driven it on the street once. It's been on the dyno 100 times, but it's just a total waste of a car. It's kind of unfortunate. So going from 12.5 to 13.0 lost power, pretty common on these LS things. So let's go a little bit richer. Power's kind of going down. Holy shit, that's hot. Yeah, that you can't touch this. So I'm gonna just kind of consider the differences there just in kind of temperature. I'm sure if we let it cool off, that power would come back. But I've done this 100 zillion times. 99 out of 100 times 12.5 is going to make more power than 13.0 or 12.0 on this platform. That's a little bit different for some of the other ones, but I think what I might do is Friday. There's no way the weather can be as atrocious next week as it is right now. I might leave this on the dyno over the weekend and then come in on Monday early and try and swing some numbers around, because it's just so brutally hot right now. I feel like it's kind of a lost cause trying to find that couple of horsepower that these last few little tweaks can make. So I guess with that being said, for the time being, I'm going to make some like 50% throttle runs. Yeah, well, probably do like, I don't know, 30%, 50%, and 75%, and just touch up fueling. So what I'm going to do here is, this is so much easier with drive-by-wire throttle bodies, but you can still do it drive-by cable, is I'm going to bring it up to the hold RPM. I'm going to watch my actual TPS live on the screen here, get it to 25%, and then try and make the run and just sort of watch the TPS and do my best to try and maintain a flat, you know, kind of throttle shit. This thing does some weird stuff. Like, it'll start perfectly fine 15 times, and then on the 16th time it doesn't start very well, and then 17 through 30 it starts perfectly fine again. I don't like stuff like that. That's annoying. He actually mentioned some weird startup inconsistencies when he dropped it off. Alright, that's about 25 right there. It's always interesting to watch how much map drops during the run when you do a part throttle like that. And you definitely get into weird parts of the map that you never really use when you do this. But I'm glad I did this because it wants some fuel up there. Down there, I guess you would call that. So let me tweak this and we'll try it again. That's what power looks like at 25% throttle. Tanks. Alright, I'm going to repeat the same run. Oh, just out of habit, almost made a full throttle run. That was dumb. To add some fuel at lower map. I've never seen one want this much fuel down low before like this. Do it again. I'm going to try this a little differently now. So anytime numbers start getting out of what you would consider to be like normal and what you're used to seeing, I start to worry that once you start digging trying to like correct that you sometimes you end up creating different types of problems. So I'm going to go up to like 5500 steady state. I don't even know if I can get there. It might take more throttle. Alright, so that's confirming what the other thing is confirming. So you're going to have like 9,000 revisions of tune files for this because it's being so weird. Let me... I'm going to just reshape the whole bottom of the fuel map. Definitely interesting. Well, I'm sure as hell glad that I decided to do what I decided to do. Alright, so now I'm going to repeat my sweep run at 25%. And then we'll do the same thing at 50. It's so hot. It's like impossible to find the gear that you want with this trans. Check that out, getting the fuel in right at 6,000 RPM, picked up like 30 horsepower. I've never seen one this far off before, it's so weird. Alright, let's do 50%. Fairly confident now that I've shaped everything down low that we give it more throttle, it'll be closer than how far off it just was. 50%'s nearly 100 kPa at low RPM. It'll go down though. Yeah, so there's not much difference between 50% and 100%, but there's a world of a difference between 25% and 50%. So that looked perfectly good. Save that log. So I'm just gonna do like 30 to 35% just to kind of get in the middle of the zone that was being a pain in my ass. I've actually seen it numerous times where a car will actually make more power at like 75 or 80% throttle than at 100% throttle. Alright, so let's do 30%. And fueling looked good again. Alright, I'm gonna let it cool off for a second. And I actually want to duplicate one of these 25 or 30% runs and let you watch real time the bubble go through the fuel table so you can watch how much map drops. It's kind of interesting. Here's what 30% looks like. Camera's overheating, it's so hot. That's good. So you're just gonna hold this at 30% so you can sort of watch. This isn't how most people drive, but situationally, a car like this, it's kind of important to hit everything. So dyno's holding it. There's about 30 right there. So you saw I was able to hold 30% and maintain that pretty consistent. And just to put into perspective the heat that we're dealing with, so I literally didn't make any changes, just let it cool out for a few minutes, and it picked up 20 horsepower everywhere at 30% throttle. I'll show you. absolutely identical runs. It was completely miserable outside. All right, it's kind of the end of the day on Friday, so I think what I'm going to do is take this off of the dyno, keep it over the weekend, that way I can mess with the cold start, and I'm going to spend a decent chunk of time driving this around. There are two, it runs perfect, but there are two kind of concerning things that are intermittent, and I'm not sure what the deal is with it yet, but sometimes it starts a little bit kind of crappy, and then occasionally it'll be sitting there idling, and if you give it throttle, it'll stumble. And then if you just let back off of the throttle and then hit the throttle, then everything goes back to perfect. And you can do the exact same thing 150 times and it runs totally fine. So I don't know what's up with that. I gotta log it and see if maybe the TPS is intermittently cutting out, or yeah, I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, I don't like it, so I gotta sort that out. So on Monday we'll drive around a little bit and hopefully we can iron out these last few things.